Hello and welcome to the study unit of Food Policy, Regulatory Framework, and Strategic Risk Management. In this study unit, we will go under the submodule of Policy Compliance and Regulatory Adaptation. So, this submodule examines the regulatory environment governing food waste prevention and the strategic mechanisms organizations must adopt to ensure compliance. It explores international guidance from institutions such as the Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Health Organization, alongside binding European legislation, including the Waste Framework Directive, as amended by the Directive EU 2018/851. So the learning outcome from this submodule would be to learners will be able to ensure compliance with food waste reduction laws by adapting operations with regulatory frameworks. So that means by the end of this module, you will be able to explain the regulatory framework governing food waste prevention at an international and local levels. You will be able to interpret guidance from organizations such as the FAO and the WHO in relation to food waste policy, and you will also be able to analyze the requirements of the Waste Framework Directive as amended by the Directive EU 2018/851 in 2025. And you will also be able to apply key regulatory principles, including the waste hierarchy, food waste measurement obligations, and bio-waste segregation. So moving on, before we start, we would like to go through a pre-lesson self-assessment. So you are to answer these 4 true or false questions, starting from the first one. The first question is, EU directives automatically impose direct legal obligations on individual food businesses? The second question is, prevention is the highest priority within the waste hierarchy? The third question is, food waste measurement under EU law is voluntary for member states? And the fourth one is, non-compliance with food waste laws can lead to reputational and financial risks. So try to answer these questions based on what you already know about or your general knowledge on the regulations regarding food waste in the European Union. So moving forward, so the answer to the first question is that it's false. Directives set objectives for member states, which then transpose them into national law that may create obligations for businesses, but they do not automatically impose direct legal obligations. So the second question is true. Prevention is the highest priority within the waste hierarchy because if prevention is the easiest sort of stratus to work from, and then going downwards into other types of priorities in the waste hierarchy. And the third one is, food waste measurement under EU law is voluntary for member states. No, it is not voluntary. It is mandatory standardized measurement and reporting obligations for member states, which is introduced by the directive. And the fourth one, non-compliance with food waste laws can lead to reputational and financial risks. That is true. Organizations can suffer greatly if they are not careful about the regulations and if they're not careful about following the regulations. So moving forward. So the introduction. Food systems operate under structured legal and regulatory environments that are designed to ensure that food safety, public health, environment protection, and fair trade practices are accepted. Increasingly, regulatory frameworks also address sustainability concerns, particularly with food waste reduction, carbon emissions, and other sustainable practices. And so what we want to do first is understand how these regulatory frameworks work. So we want to start by explaining one of the key binding documents when it comes to handling food waste is the Waste Framework Directive. Of course, there are many, many types of directive developed throughout the years in regards to food waste regulations, but this one stands out to us particularly because one, it was amended recently, and two, it is easy to plug in and it's quite easy to, let's say, adopt into the day-to-day operations of an organization and so on. So this directive establishes the waste hierarchy and obliges member states to implement waste prevention measures and programs. So we are sure that this This directive is an obligation for organizations and food businesses that operate under the European Union. And so the directive was significantly amended by the Directive 2018-851, which replaces the old one, and it contains updated version prevention programs and procedures that catch up to the ever-evolving food business. So we know that food businesses change by within a couple of years. So many things get introduced. For example, novel foods, new types of practices, new types of requirements are and needs arise when the food system evolves. So we need to always, well, the regulatory, um, uh, the regulatory, uh, the regulatory object in charge of taking care of the directives needs to always evolve and update itself and amend the directives to fit today's needs. So the EU directives do not impose obligations on individual businesses, but they establish objectives and legal principles at EU level. So they don't, yes, it's an obligation, but it is not an obligation on individual businesses. It's an obligation on member states. Um, so moving forward, one of the most important foundations is the waste hierarchy. So the waste hierarchy ranks waste management options from the most to least sustainable. So the first priority we have on the waste hierarchy is the prevention. The second priority is the preparation for reuse. The third is recycling, and the fourth is other recovery. And the fifth and the last one is disposal, seeing that the disposal is the least sustainable option that we can take. So starting from prevention, going to preparation, then to recycling, and then to other recovery, and finishing with disposal. So member states, so these are some of the measurement and monitoring requirements imposed by the directive. The member states are required to apply a common methodology for measuring food waste and collecting data at different stages of the food supply chain. They are also required to report on results to the European Commission. So not only do they collect data on the food waste situation of the state, they are also required to report the results to the European Commission. And this encourages the integration of digital waste tracking systems, categorization of waste types, periodic waste audits, and database decision making. So measurements become a foundation for both compliance and efficiency improvement. The directive reinforces the prioritization of redistribution of edible surplus food before disposal, reinforcing social and environmental responsibility. So, by encouraging redistribution, removing regulatory barriers that oppose donation, so these are some of the things that we member states develop to encourage food donation, supporting donation networks and facilitating safe handling and traceability systems. The directive creates an environment where redistribution is smoothly integrated into day-to-day operations. One of the other things that member states can do is separate collection and bio-waste requirements. So the amended waste framework directive strengthens the requirements for separate collection of waste streams, including bio-waste. So member states must ensure that bio-waste is collected separately, recycled efficiently through composting or anaerobic digestion, and managed environmentally sound ways. This has direct operational implications for food service operators, retailers, food processors who must ensure the segregation of biowaste and organic waste and proper storage and handling. Now we want to pause for a minute and do a knowledge check. So there's one question. Which document establishes the EU waste hierarchy? So we know that clearly by now that the document that establishes the EU waste hierarchy is the Waste Framework Directive. The European Green Deal has nothing to do with waste hierarchy, and the document that establishes the waste hierarchy is the Waste Framework Directive. So, by following the foundation and adapting them to day to day activities, the food waste weight of an organization or a member state can be mitigated the operational with these following operational adaptations. So we need to adapt to accurate demand forecasting, which takes a little bit of study, a little bit of research on our organization to see what the demand versus output is, and we need to engineer our menus based on the waste data. So these are not step by step, I would say, but these are quite important to be followed to make sure that our organization is up to date with the regulations and following the regulations as well. So we need to also do flexible portion sizes. So in the menus, as menus get developed, we can offer smaller portion sizes or larger portion sizes, making the consumer more active and like kind of making the consumer understand what their hunger level, their satiety level might be. And it's quite tricky, but flexible portion sizes offer the option to go for a smaller portion size. So there's first in, first out, or FIFO, which is an inventory management, which is you the first product that gets in get used the first we prioritize the first product that gets into the storage, and so this way we avoid using up or we avoid expired items, spoilage, and so on. So we need to do root to stem cooking techniques, which means using the entire vegetable or so in our cooking techniques, so we can avoid waste from trimming and other preparation. So we need to monitor plate waste as well to understand which items get wasted the most, so we can later understand how we can remedy this with adjustments in the menu, in the inventory and purchasing. And then we need to also encourage self-awareness training to the staff so they can understand, so everybody in the organization is understanding just how heavy a food waste load is on an organization. So the other regulations are food waste monitoring systems. So to meet regulatory reporting obligations, organizations must establish structure of food waste monitoring systems that generate reliable and comparable data. So waste should be categorized into origin, preparation, type of reason for waste, and so on. And the next regulation is procurement and inventory adjustments. So procurement practices play a central role in food waste prevention and regulatory compliance. So, purchasing decisions should be guided by demand forecasting to ensure that quantities ordered align with the expected consumption. We want to avoid spoilage by any and all means. The next one is redistribution and donation systems. So where legislation encourages or facilitates food redistribution, organizations should establish a formal system for donating surplus edible food. Most organizations are not, let's say, open to donating food because of the 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 problems that it might arise later on, and we see this in, I wouldn't say all, but most organizations do not are not very open into donation systems. But by arranging in a way that they can step into the program easily or make the transition smoothly, we are ensuring that redistribution is respected in the regulations. So partnerships with food banks, charities, or community organizations enable safe and timely transfer of food that is no longer salvable but remains suitable for consumption. So we want to make sure that we want to make sure that the food we're donating is suitable for consumption. The other one is waste segregation and bio-waste management, which we've mentioned before. Effective segregation of waste streams is essential for enabling recycling and environmentally sound treatment of organic materials. So organizations should implement color-coded bin systems that clearly distinguish food waste, recyclables, and residual waste. So Another regulation is used cooking oil and special waste management. So used cooking oil and other special wastes require separate handling due to their potential environmental impact. So oil should be collected in designated containers and labels and prevent leaks and contamination. And disposal must be carried out by licensed providers authorized to recycle or treat such materials. That means we can't just. This is very familiar in the restaurants, because restaurants have a lot, especially fast food restaurants have a lot of oil discard, and so that oil discard needs to be dealt with according to the procedure and efficiently. So it doesn't make way for other dangerous repercussions. So, internal policy development for compliance. Regulatory compliance must be embedded within the organization through formal internal policies and procedures. So, that means organizations should take the directives seriously and adopt them into their own practices, so they can see which one they're able to maximize on and minimize on, and so on. Some might be really easy to adopt, and some might need further research to be able to adopt it further. The other one is risk management in regulatory compliance. So, non compliance with food waste legislation can expose organizations to significant risks, including financial penalties, operational restrictions, reputational harm, increased regulatory scrutiny, and potential legal liability. So, yes, risk management in regulatory compliance is quite important. So, of course, when we adopt new directives or ongoing, when we change our regulations in organizations, there are some challenges. So some of the challenges are administrative requirements, and those can be quite complex and time consuming, while investments in technology and monitoring systems may strain financial resources. Some of the most advanced tools for monitoring food waste come at a high price, and so this is a sort of a give and take kind of situation where organizations need to kind of navigate this sector of regulation adaptation. And so limited staff awareness or resistance to operational challenges can further hinder implementation, which just means that this is something that is a challenge but can be mediated easily by giving staff the required trainings on food waste management, regulations, and so on. So, in particularly in small and medium-sized enterprises with constrained capacity. So we'll do one more knowledge check. The main purpose of standardized food waste measurement is marketing improvement, regulatory transparency and comparability, menu diversification, staff reduction. So it is regulatory transparency and comparability. So the main reason or the main purpose of standardized food waste measurement is to make sure that we are compliant with regulatory transparency and comparability. So, in conclusion, policy compliance and regulatory adaptation are essential for aligning organizational practices with food waste reduction laws. Effective implementation requires integration of regulatory principles into daily operations and procurement decisions, waste monitoring systems, staff training, and long term strategic planning. That's all for this submodule. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope this module has taught you a lot about the required EU legislations and regulations, and also the directive.